Garrick Relentless, that, my friend, is a lot of Planeswalkers.
Yeah, you know, I usually complain when I play blue-based control decks without Sphinx's Revelation, but he can really just power through a lot of these, like, you know, grindy games that he's going to see, you know, against a lot of the more aggressive opponents and things like that. So having all these Planeswalkers to help gain you virtual card advantage looks like it's working out for him pretty well, so it starts 7-0.
And, you know, besides those Planeswalkers, you're going to see both players look like they've kept their 7. A couple dual lands to start here, so they just want to hit their land drops. You've got Farseek, you've got Think Twice, Abrupt Decay, Warp Physique, Far Away, a couple creatures in Snapcaster Mage, Progenitor Mimic, and Thragtusk, but a spell that you don't see a lot of on this type of strategy is 3 copies of Mutilate.
Yeah, it looks like he has a bunch of swamps. The dual lands from the Ravnica block obviously adding a lot to Mutilate out of the core set. But I like his list a lot. You know, it looks a lot like a black-blue control deck, and he's just kind of splashing green for Thragtusk and Planeswalkers. But having Farseek in the control matchup so that you can ramp into earlier Planeswalkers is pretty huge. And, you know, we might see that come into effect here as Jake gets an early mana advantage with a Farseek against Ross, who's just sitting on 2 lands.
So Jake is going to play a land, and I think we might see our first Planeswalker. We do. There's that one of Garrick Relentless. So
does he have the Syncopate? He does not.
I see a rewind over there in Azorius Charm. Yeah, so that's going to resolve. Now, that's not the biggest threat against blue-white-red. No. It feels like it's more annoying more than anything else.
It can be. You know, it kind of turns off all your Augurs of Bolas, though, and, like, you never want the Garrick to flip, because then he's going to be able to tutor out things like Aetherling and, you know, Thragtusk and Snapcaster Mage, all of which just gain him more virtual card advantage against Ross because they just shut down all the kinds of one-for-ones he's trying to do. Ross's deck, you know, he's a traditional red, white, blue. He has 2 copies of Aetherling, which is obviously the newer edition. Ever since the Pro Tour, I think, it really started to catch on. He's just incredibly difficult to deal with. I think Aetherling is much better in green-based decks, though, like we see the one from Jake's deck, you know, because you have the Farseeks and you can actually cast it on time and still have mana to protect it, whereas these red, white, blue decks just have to naturally get the 7 mana, just slow as potatoes. And, you know, and as you see here, he's just so far behind because Jake has a Planeswalker that's generating advantage every turn. You know, Jake not even really needing to cast anything until Ross actually deals with the Garrick.
Yeah, you see Jake, you know, his land for the turn wasn't a Fire Drown Yard, so he has a different angle of attack that he can take. You're actually going to see him drown Ross. There's an Azorius Charm, a Hollow Fountain, and an Aetherling. But as you said, Jake doesn't have any reason to commit anything to the board or run it into a counterspell or anything. He's got 2 angles of attack right now. He's got a Planeswalker that's problematic. He has a Drown Yard that can slowly but surely take out Merriam's library. He can give him a little bit of options with the Snapcaster Mage that Merriam may have in his hand, but, you know, it's going to chop down his library and actually cut off some of his options too.
Yeah, so Ross here actually, you know, holding back for the Restoration Angel. I'm not sure I really like the attack from Jake, unless he has like a good follow-up, and it looks like another Garrick is going to come down next turn. But, you know, Ross, it looks like he played it at the end of turn, actually.
So it looks like he, I mean, if you're Ross right now, too, as you saw him play at a turn instead of, like, play it and then block with it, you don't really have a good idea of what's in Jake's deck. You know, so you're like a little, I guess timid is the word I would use to say, you know, all right, I'm gonna pounce on your thing. Whereas, you know, if he pounces on his thing, then the shields are down and Jake can resolve a different Planeswalker, which I don't think Ross wants any part of. I think he's already having enough difficulty dealing with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Ross really didn't want to leave himself vulnerable to anything, holding up the rewind throughout the entirety of the turn. That allows, even though he misses eating a wolf, he doesn't have to face down Big Garrick right now, which is basically what would have happened. I guess no, because he would still have Garrick in play, so that's just false.
He's doing okay, as you see Tameo as the draw there from Jake. But, you know, Ross, again, as you said, he has the shields up. You know, he took some damage. He's going to take some more damage here and move down to 8. Yeah. But this is basically an example of him using his life tool as a resource, because now Angel can actually stand tall moving forward after this turn, and he's got a rewind for a Planeswalker.
Right, and it looks like he has a Sphinx's Revelation too, so, you know, I feel like Jake probably should have just cast something here, you know, Tameo or a Garrick. You know, it's hard to say whether or not you should, but if you give the Flash deck too much time, does he even have 4 cards in hand?
We're going to see a Warp Physique. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think he's only got 3 cards in hand.
No, he's got exactly 4. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if, what's the card? Funeral Charm? Funeral Charm from Ross Merriam here would have been pretty devastating. Unfortunately, it's just a rewind, but probably going to have an end-of-turn Sphinx Revelation. This Tameo look like it's going to do a little work against that Angel, though.
And the question is Jake Taft willing to pull the trigger on one of these Planeswalkers? Because, again, that Ross is exactly where he wants to be. I know you have a lot of experience with blue, white, red. This is a very comfortable feeling of having 6 mana and, like, this Restoration Angel and basically making your opponent make a decision on what do I think my opponent has in his hand.
Yeah.
You know, what does Taft think Merriam has? As he's leading out with a Snapcaster Mage here, he's going to play a Warp Physique. It's going to resolve.
Yep. And it looks like Jake's going to crash in for 6, putting Ross down to 2. But Ross is just going to go right back up to 5, draw 3 cards, maybe hit a Supreme Verdict, maybe something else to stabilize. But Ross, you know, if he doesn't have, you know, that many, he has 3 copies of Supreme Verdict, but it didn't look like he drew one. So this actually could just sort of fall apart here.
You're going to draw 1 more card. It's an Augur Bolus. That can get in the way.
That's basically 3 more cards.
Yeah, you can dig a little deeper.
All right, so let's try to hit that Supreme Verdict. Looks like Land City.
So I know you're new to SCG Live. That's what Augur Bolus does.
No, I know. You look at 3 cards and put them on bottom.
Organize them on bottom. Okay, good.
I'm not you know experienced in the SCG Live version, but I've seen the real life version.
Okay.
So I know all about that.
Yeah. You've cast your fair share of Augurs, I believe.
Yeah.
As Pillar of Flame is going to take out a wolf now, so he's just basically trying to 1-for-1 with a bunch of removal, which I mean, that's not where he wants to be.
Yeah, he does have a Snapcaster Mage here, which looks like he's going to just Snap Pillar, take care of another wolf. You know, and he's not really vulnerable on board anymore, which is good for him, because this Tamiyo is going to tap down one of his blockers, probably the Augur Bolus. Jake could, you know, just play Garrick, try to build his board a little more, since Ross can't really attack the Planeswalker with his creatures. But it depends on whether he wants to get aggressive or not. It looks like he does.
Now, if you're attacked in this position, do you want to get aggressive or do you want Garrick on the table?
I mean, that's a good question. I honestly think, you know, you're putting your opponent to 3, and you still have a big Planeswalker that's, if it ever ultimates, you can't win. You know, like every Warp Physique just takes care of every creature. You know, once you get to enough cards, Aetherling can't even attack you because, you know, you can just Warp Physique it, force them to blink it out, you know. But Ross, it looks like he has another Sphinx Revelation. He's still facing down the Tamiyo. He could just play an Aetherling here and just try to kill the Tamiyo before it gets to ultimate status.
Yeah, I mean, the tough part here now is that now we're starting to play a main phase game, right? Where, you know, if he plays an Aetherling, then Taft is going to slam down a Garrick, and now your Aetherling is going to have to work like double or triple duty to start taking out like Planeswalkers. And does he have enough mana to go, you know, unblockable, kill your Planeswalker, flash it to be able to block, and then take care of your other one? That's the question you have to ask, and we're going to find out.
Yeah,
because
so
he is casting.
I actually think Jake has another Snapcaster Mage in hand. Okay, well, I saw a blue card, I thought, and it would have been really. Actually, he does. He could have end of turn Snapcaster Mage, tap targeting the Aetherling, and then attacked Ross for 4, and that would have killed him unless, you know, Ross had one of his other Azorius Charms. But as you see, there's already 2 in the graveyard. I guess Searing Spear, another card that could potentially come out, turn and burn as well. So maybe he just wants to try to get max value, but the Aetherling, man, you got to try to kill him before that guy gets online.
Yeah. You can't let that thing just do its thing. That's what you've seen. Because even if he,
it does a lot of things.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So much text.
And even if we see Tamiyo, you know, tap an Aetherling right now, obviously, you know, Merriam would blink it out. Snapcaster would come across and put Merriam down to 1, which is not 0.
Right. And
then Merriam can try to figure out what to do, and then that Revelation comes back on. But I think Taft would also take the opportunity to resolve a Garrett Primal Hunter here too. So, you know, it's not all lost for Taft's side, but, you know, as you said, you want to get the game over with as soon as possible once Aetherling comes into play, because that thing will turn a game on its own.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you let Ross untap with an Aetherling and potentially another Sphinx's Revelation in hand, and, you know, it's just going to turn sour. You know, even if Ross had an Azorius Charm or some burn spell to kill one of your Snapcaster Mages, sure, you're not getting any value out of it, but, I mean, all you have right now is a Farseek, and you're spending most of your turn right now playing a Garrick. You're still not able to get, you know, more cards out of that Snapcaster Mage, so... I dislike the holding back, you know, playing it safe or what have you, but sometimes people get a little blinded by cards like Snapcaster Mage, where they understand that, you know, it can just be Ambush Viper, but, you know, they never want to not get full value out of it. And you know, when I was playing a lot of Delver back in Standard, I would play it aggressively when I would play like a Delver on turn 1, and then just, you know, play Snapcaster on turn 2 and start attacking for 5 every turn. Hold up for Mana Leak the rest of the game. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But
no one wants to cast an Ambush Viper, but if an Ambush Viper is going to win the game, I think you're happy to cast an Ambush Viper.
Yeah. So here it looks like Ross can choose to kill one of the 2 Planeswalkers, but he's leaving himself a little vulnerable. He could just, like, pass turn, cast a big Sphinx's Revelation, and then start killing Planeswalkers with a fistful of cards. I mean, he could kill Garrick here, but then he's going to maybe lose to the Tamiyo because he can only Sphinx's Rev for 5. I guess that'll put him to 6, so I guess that's maybe good enough, but dangerous water. The
thing that's kind of super interesting is Merriam, he very clearly has a lot of decisions to make this turn. I mean, for starters, do I want to attack with the Aetherling and just try to take down Garrett? Or do I want to try to do it, take down a Tamiyo? And you see him right now, he's casting Revelation for 3. That's the other thing. How much of my Revelation be for? Is 3 life going to be enough?
Right.
Am I supposed to just tap out and just take it all? And the other thing that he has to keep in mind too, Todd, we're working with perfect information as far as deck list is concerned. Mm-hmm. There's no counter magic in Jake Taft's deck. But if you're Merriam, you're probably scared of like Syncopate or Dissipate or some sort of counter spell. Whereas we know there's none in here whatsoever. There's a lot of Planeswalkers, a couple of creatures, and then some removal spells. So there's a lot he has to think about as he's going to take down the Garrett. He's going to blink this out and pass the turn.
Yeah, but I mean, it looks like, Jake's just going to cast Snapcaster here, use Tamiyo, tap the Aetherling, and he's got lethal in play. So he found, the same line he could have taken the turn before. However, now it's a little more safe because Ross only has 1 mana. Nothing really you're going to be afraid of for 1 mana. No unsummon really in a lot of these flash decks. It was popping up here and there, a little bit more in the banned flash just because they don't have access to better spot removal like Pillar Flame and Turn and Burn. But, I think it's pretty safe to just go for the win there because otherwise your Tamiyo is just going to die next turn to the Aetherling and you just want to get him dead.
So Jake Taft is going to win game number 1 here with his Bug Walkers deck, a deck that we have not seen in Standard, I want to say almost ever. But
things they pop up every now and then.
Sure. To this success level, we're looking at 7-0 in a 570-person Standard tournament. This is pretty impressive thus far. Merriam down a game with Blue Red Flash. We're going to go over his sideboard first. I know you have it in front of you as far as, what he can do to basically shore up things against Planeswalkers.
Right. So I know if you were looking at the game, Supreme Verdict looked like it would have been very good. However, it's not great when you're just facing down a bunch of Planeswalkers from the opponent's side. He had a Garrett Relentless making a bunch of guys. He has potentially Garrett Primal Hunter making some beasts. And I think those are the only 2 that make creatures. But other than that, the only creatures that Supreme Verdict can really kill are Thragtusk, the Snapcaster Mage, and then the one of Progenitor Mimic, which is probably getting sided out. Obviously, Ross doesn't know that, perfectly, but I think he's looking to be siding out the Supreme Verdicts. I think he's smart enough to figure that part out. I think he really wants Jace Memory Adept to just try to match on card advantage, as well as killing his opponent's Jaces, potentially just milling him out if he has no way to really attack him to death with an Aetherling since he only has 2. But I think he's just looking for more win conditions. He has 2 negates that he's 100% bringing in since he saw so many of those Planeswalkers from Jake's side. But I think other than that, it looks pretty standard. Just going to side out some removal, side in some counter spells and Planeswalkers.
Yeah, we take a look over here at Jake Taft's side. More Planeswalkers, honestly. He's already got 2, 4, 6, 8. Now he's got 9 to start with, and he's got 2 more that are really good in this match. And this is the way that people used to beat Blue, White, Red, or when the mirror was Jace Memory Adept. He has 2 of those to bring in. You take a look at he also has an additional Garrett Relentless, which it's kind of hard to say if it won him that last game, but it certainly got the ball rolling that game. It forced some interaction from Merriam's side, and then ultimately those other 2 Planeswalkers in Tamiyo and Garrett Primal Hunter probably put the game on ice. You also see here a Pithing Needle, Graves of Granite, 4 Deathrite Shamans, 2 Cremates, 2 Notion Thieves. Whew. We've already seen one person's life get ruined. Yeah. I think more than anything, I think you and I want to see those come in for a potential blowout.
I like Ross a lot, but there would be nothing greater than to watch a Sphinx's Revelation for 6 get Notion Thief.
Yes,
you can have your 6 life. Nice Heroes Reunion that tapped you out. Nice Stream of Life, buddy.
Yes.
I'll draw 6.
We could have a Notion Thief coming into play here, a card not just for Legacy anymore, and it's even arguable if it even is for Legacy.
Yeah, I have one in my sideboard that I'm going to be playing tomorrow. I'm actually just looking for stories. I like. There's a lot of cool 4-drops you can play in Legacy. Right when I started playing a lot of Maverick, I played one of Garrett Relentless in my deck, and people just laughed at it until I played it. Fought their Stoneforge Mystic on turn 3 when I was on the play, and then they had to read the back of it, and they're just like, oh my god, how do I ever beat this?
Yeah, so Infinite Night of the Reliquaries, or...
Yeah, or, just a bunch of 1/1s, and maybe I'll use my Night of the Reliquaries, search up a Gavany Township.
Sure.
That's big game in Legacy, boys. Yeah, I like doing kooky stuff in Legacy. It's fun, especially when you have so many cool tutor cards, like Night of the Reliquary, just being able to play any cool land, like the new combo, Dark Depths plus Thespian Stage. That's a really interesting interaction that you can just combo out with just a Night of the Reliquary in play. So,
you just put one of each in your deck.
Right. It seems pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to trying it out. I'm playing Deathblade tomorrow, though. We'll see how that ends up.
I think you and a lot of people are.
Yeah, if Lauren Nolan can win an open with it...
Anybody can. So we're seeing Merriam's going to go back, as is Taft. So we're going to see both players go to at least 6. If you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Todd Anderson here in the booth. SCG Open Series has made it to Baltimore, Maryland. If you guys do want to join in on the conversation with us, feel free on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGBALT. We are in round 8 of 10 here. You guys do see Jake Taft 7-0 with his innovative Bug Walkers deck, facing down Ross Merriam, who's actually gotten the pair up with his Blue White Red Flash deck. So we'll see. We see a face that we're used to with Ross Merriam, kind of a
grizzly face.
Yeah, a grizzled veteran of the Open Series.
I think he should just shave into a Doom Rider. All he's got to do is shave the chin hair. It would just be the Stone Cold.
Ross, a big fan of his beard. Jake without the facial hair, but Jake with the better record. And a Broncos fan. So we'll see, as he's already up a game here. Again, his Bug Walkers deck is a deck that, he's been telling us about on breaks. I'm 7-0. You guys should do a feature match on me. Jake, you got what you wanted. You're under the lights, and you're up a game, my friend. And if he wins, we could probably see a double draw into the top 8. So
yeah, that would be awesome. And this is a very innovative list from Jake. We haven't really seen a whole lot of decks that do this all Planeswalkers all the time. That kind of strategy was popularized by Lewis Laskin a few years ago with the Red, White, Blue Super Friends deck, which was like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Gideon Jura, and just like a ton of other, good Planeswalkers all in the same deck. And we haven't really seen a whole lot of that lately, just because things like Restoration Angel and even Advent of the Worm now make Planeswalkers a little bit more risky. But when you do have the good removal to back them up, they're very, very good.
So we're going to see an Augur of Bolas here. The choice is between Negate and Sphinx Revelation, and Revelation is the worst of the two.
Yeah, clearly Negate more powerful than the Revelation already in hand, seeing as Ross cannot beat a Planeswalker.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. So Negate is going to be working overtime in this match, as Augur of Bolas, is going to come across for 1. Taft going to play it in Drowned Catacombs. Here's a Garruk Relentless, and now we're going to see if Merriam cares about this.
Yeah, he's got a Restoration Angel. If he fights, he's going to blink it and then just attack and kill Garruk.
That's exactly what you see.
Full value, still sitting on a Syncopate and a Negate. Ross, I find it very hard for him to lose this game, seeing as Jake is just sorcery speed tap out deck, basically.
Yeah, he certainly got him good with that Restoration Angel. You see a Supreme Verdict drawn. Resto's going to take down Garruk, 1 from the Augur, and if you've noticed one thing, Augur has hit both times, which means the world is going to explode after this is over.
And these are the games where Flash wins, is when their Augur hits, and then they lose every other time when it bricks, because you're playing, what's the 1/3 for a blue and a white?
That's a Lumen Grid Warden.
Lumen Grid Warden. Was that the OG? I think they reprinted it in a different form. I'm not a huge fan of things like Gnarled Mass and Lumen Grid Warden. And very often you'll see cards in Standard that have all these sweet abilities that are just completely irrelevant. And then you just end up playing 3/3/3, like Great Sable Stag against random, Jund deck. Or
against any non-fairy opponent. Yeah. And it wasn't even that great against fairies to begin with, honestly.
Oh, come on.
I mean, they made a pretty simple adjustment by playing Lightning Bolt and racing them.
Yeah.
We don't have to like it, but it's the truth.
That's true. The mana was worse, though.
That's true. That's true. So you saw Merriam cycle an Azorius Charm, build a little bit of velocity, draws a card for the turn. It's a Hallowed Fountain. He's going to come across with Restoration Angel and Augur of Bolas. Taft looks like he's having a little bit of land troubles here. He does have a Jace Memory Adept in his hand, but pulling the trigger on that right now, it seems pretty tough to do.
Yeah, looks this empty Snapcaster Mage, as it were. Gonna get a little aggressive, I guess, but it's not looking good. He's got a Thragtusk, which he can slam, but honestly, you can't just hold your entire hand against Flash. You have to run them out of counterspells eventually. Like right now, he's in a tough spot. It's not like he's got a ton of cards that will be able to suddenly take down Ross Merriam, at instant speed. He decides to play Warp Physique at the end of turn after taking the damage, which is a little strange. If he was going to do it, I think he should have just killed it before he took the damage, since he's already at a pretty low life total. Ross's deck does have burn spells in it.
So we see Jake does draw a Progenitor Mimic for the turn. You see the Thragtusk in his hand as well, and I agree with you. And you're not going to get anywhere against the Flash deck by not casting spells. This is exactly what they want to happen.
Yeah, they want you to just pass the turn so that they can cast Sphinx's Revelation for a literal billion. And, they're going to be up on cards, up on mana, and even up on board because you didn't do anything to progress the board state. If you were forcing him to counter all these spells every turn, he wouldn't be able to have that one extra window to Sphinx's Revelation for all of it. And it looks like now he just wants to do it for 3.
And now he's going to try to Notion Thief, and Ross says, I do not think so.
Ross was ready, man. Yeah. He knew there was something going on over there.
And we actually saw earlier, Todd, when we had Ross on camera against AJ Kerrigan, and that he never, ever did anything with his revelations that was just like, yep, tap them all, rev for haha, a million. You know, he was always leaving a lot of mana untapped. It was typically 3 mana he was leaving untapped for syncopates, for dissipates, for negate plus dispel to represent a lot of different things. And you see him being able to counter that Notion Thief for no blowouts, untap, play an Aetherling, and we're going to be moving on to a third one in just a moment here.
Yeah.
So here's a Thragtusk, which I think Ross is probably okay with, but how about Snapcaster Mage? Get a Syncopate back, counter that, and let's move to a third game.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, Ross very dominant in that game. He did the standard, you know, draw, go, counter everything you do. Whenever you decide not to do something, you know, flash in this Restoration Angel, you know, using that to kill the Garruk. And then Jake, you know, trying to hold up for that Notion Thief for the majority of the game really cost him a few turns where he just passed, and Ross was able to, you know, capitalize on that mana advantage because one of the benefits of playing a flash deck is that, just like fairies, you do everything on your opponent's turn that's relevant. And if you need to do something on your own turn, like cast Pillar Flame, you're not really leaving yourself vulnerable because those spells cost so little mana.
Yeah, we saw it in years past with, as you said, with fairies, with a card like Deathmark against green decks. Agony Warp was like their removal spell of choice. That's just a 2-mana spell, but it was an instant too, you know. And then, you know, if they had to tap out on their own turn, it was for some just big splashy effect, like maybe a Damnation or something, you know, something awesome. Fairies was so long ago. I can't think of all the awesome cards.
Oh,
that
you
cast
know
on their
exactly
turn.
what they cast against you every game you played against fairies. It was always Agony Warp. It was always Terror before Agony Warp.
Yep.
It was always Remove Soul before when I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, now you look at the threats that basically Merriam's deck and the Flash deck is the exact same thing. You know, if they're going to tap out mana on their turn, it's going to be for something that's completely awesome and worth tapping out for. In this case, it's an Aetherling.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we are in the format.
So, I mean, I think before it was pretty evident that Restoration Angel just wasn't really enough to finish games. You know, for a long time, that was the win condition for Blue, Red, White Flash. They would just, you know, play a couple Restoration Angels, but now there's so many green decks with so many Thragtusks. It's really hard to try to race those decks with just Restoration Angel. But Aetherling comes down to a little more expensive, so it's worse in the early game. But once you hit that, you know, point where you can cast it, protect it, or even cast and hold up a negate. Or, you know, like as you saw, Ross had a Cavernous Souls named, you know, Shapeshifter on Cavernous Souls and just cast the Aetherling without fear of a counterspell, and the game ends in just a few attacks. The biggest part, though, is that there's basically nothing you can do against an Aetherling in Standard to actually kill it with a 1-for-1. Unless, you know, your opponent just so happens to completely tap out on turn 6 and cast it, but that just basically never happens unless they need a blocker and they're going to die otherwise.
Yeah. Or they just know that they're playing against a deck where they can just cast it on their turn with no mana up, and there's no way for you to punish them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, against a red deck, I think against red you can probably do that because like it's got 5 toughness. You know, maybe you have to block with it, maybe you don't, but there's no way for them to actually punish you for doing that.
I mean, if you decide to block, sometimes Gore Cleanser and Pager can get a little frisky.
That's true.
But looks like we're on to game 3 here. Jake's going to be on the play. They both kept their opening 7. Looks like it could be a good game.
Yeah, so that we had this happen in the AJ Kerrigan versus Ross Merriam match. It's very telling when someone plays their second land, and it's like a Nephalia Drowned or a Cavernous Souls. That means they probably don't have a third one in their hand because they don't want to play that if they don't have to.
Right, and I mean, there's a pretty good argument for that, I think, before Shocklines were printed.
Yeah.
But now that you have Shocklines, a lot of people don't want to take that 2 damage. They want to try to draw a land that doesn't deal them damage, so they play the one now that doesn't, even though, you know, it might hurt them later on, like this Nephalia Drowned Yard. If he just follows it up with like another Watery Grave, then he just all of a sudden can't cast a Garruk Primal Hunter on turn 5 or turn 4 when he has, you know, access to 5 mana. But a couple Farseeks looks like he's in great shape. I'm pretty sure he has another land after this too.
Yeah, mana actually looks okay right now, and I think he does have another land in his hand as well, so he's accelerating pretty well. He's actually getting ahead of Ross Merriam pretty quickly, and then he can just start raining down Planeswalkers and force Merriam to have an answer.
I really want to see a meme that's someone just making it rain with Garruk Primal Hunters, you know? Just making them rain on him.
There's a breeding pool untapped, and
he's
let's
going
see
to
if he
sit
has
him
a
to 18.
follow-up.
He has a Think Twice.
Okay.
He's just going to cast end of turn.
Like that a lot.
I don't know about you, but I've seen so many Think Twices cast it in a turn with an opposing Voice of Resurgence in play today.
You know, we haven't had that happen once on camera.
I'm glad, because it's embarrassing.
We have not had any free elemental tokens come into play on camera just yet. As Think Twice is going to happen on Merriam's end step. Taft is going to untap. He's going to draw. You see a Thragtusk in his hand. That's how he's going to lead off his turn. Merriam has a Syncopate at the ready. And so now there's a Water Graven passing the turn back.
Yeah, so, I mean, Jake, you know, he had the thing twice in the yard. He's not out of gas yet. Merriam does have access to another syncopated hand. Sitting on a Supreme Verdict should the board get a little out of control. Looks like he has a couple more lands and an Augur of Bulls. So both players have a lot of stuff to do. The Drown Yard from Taft means, you know, hey, I can just win the game without actually having to cast another spell. Puts Ross in a position where he's got to start applying pressure to the board.
Yeah, I think the actual like impossibles happened here for Taft in that he doesn't have like he has a Warp Physique and a Mutilate in his hand to go along with the land, but he actually doesn't have a Planeswalker. He's going to flashback Think Twice. Merriam's going to let that resolve, and he draws his cards for the turn. He's going to untap and draw another card, and that's 2 more lands in Drowned Catacomb and Hinterland Harbor. And for a deck that has 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, potentially 12 Planeswalkers after sideboard, to not draw one just yet, and now Merriam actually draws a Planeswalker? We're in Bizarro land, my friend.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny to me, and this is something that you don't see a whole lot. Both players still have their Wrath of God in their deck.
Yeah.
So Jake on his side, you know, he's afraid of Restoration Angel and things like that attacking his Planeswalker, so he keeps in his Mutilates. Ross Merriam, afraid of a Planeswalker generating too many creatures, kept in his Supreme Verdict. And it's just a very strange situation. It's definitely not something you see very often.
So there's another Defy Drown Yard activation. Dissipate, Land, and Azorius Charmer, the cards that go to the graveyard. You see Taft draws a Snapcaster Mage for the turn, but these are these are poor Snapcaster Mage targets right now.
Yeah. I think Ross is really digging to hit, well, I guess his Dissipate, one of his 2 Dissipates was milled over, but he really wants a hard counter so that he can play this Jace without a lot of fear of like a follow-up from Jake and just start milling him out for 10. Because Jace's, you know, 0 ability, much better than the Falling Drown Yard's, you know, activated ability at just racing. And a Sphinx's Revelation, maybe a little dicey if you get milled a couple more times. You know, maybe you just deck yourself.
He also has to kind of be scared, depending on what his hand looks like, of Notion Thief now that he knows that it's an option from Jake Taft's deck. So he's going to take Think Twice instead of that Revelation. And it's kind of funny, if Merriam only knew that Taft's deck contains no counter magic, he would just slam that Jace out there. You're going to see Drown Yard turn over, negate a Think Twice in a land, and Taft is just going to keep on moving along here, draws Think Twice for his turn.
Yeah, you know, I don't know who's really ahead here. You know, I feel like Jake could very easily lose control of this game if Ross decides to just slam his Jace. But then he still has a bunch of outs, you know, like 4 of his own, or 5 of his own, 4 of his own Jaces to be able to legend roll Ross's. And, you know, it's just a weird thing where Ross thinks Jake probably has counterspells, like probably negates, and he just doesn't want to play the Jace.
You know, he's kind of afraid of, you know, cards like Negate, Dissipate, Dispel. I mean, there's a lot of different, I mean, heck, even like a card like Plasm Capture. You know, there's a lot of things that he may be thinking about that just are not there.
Yeah. So a flashback on Think Twice in response to a Think Twice. Maybe just trying to draw, and he hits the Dissipate. Yeah. So it looks like, unless Jake really slams something here that's a little bit better than the Lily on the Valley drew, Ross is going to play a Jace, have Dissipate back up, and the game probably should end, you know, a few turns after that. Etherling from Ross, also a very potential big problem for Jake.
I think Jake's going to lead off here with the Liliana as the test spell, and see if Merriam is going to use Dissipate on that. And I think this is really, really smart.
Yeah, I don't think that it's worth it. You know, you just don't mind discarding a card. You have a grip full. The Supreme Verdict is, you know, burning a hole in your pocket, and it looks like both players actually have access to Etherling here. So, you know, Ross does have the Dissipate, though, and Jake does not have a counter to Souls to name Shapeshifter. So, you know, Ross going to be able to counter it, play the Etherling of his own, and it's going to put Jake in a really bad spot.
Is he willing to pull the trigger on the Etherling? That's the question. You see him considering his options. He kind of wants to, but it doesn't look like he's going to. And he only has 1 Aetherling in his 75, so, you know, he's kind of, you know, basically grasping that, saying, I need you, buddy. As you see, Ross is going to knock that Liliana down to 3, and that's part of the reason they let it resolve, Todd, is I think that, you know, his thought is, I can control this pretty well.
Right.
You know, it's never going to get up to 6, and now we're going to see Merriam cast an Aetherling through a Cavern of Souls and pass the turn back.
Yeah, and Jake is going to have a real tough time actually beating this card. You know, he can play removal spells to kind of slow it down, because while the removal spell doesn't kill it, it does take it out of combat when you have to blink it with its ability. but you know you only have a finite number of cards to do this with. Jake doesn't have access to something like a Sphinx's Revelation to put him ahead on cards so that he's able to just sling a ton of spells with Aetherling and come out ahead. Drown Yard here, not really going to be able to race. You know, Jake could top deck, you know, a way to protect his Aetherling here, maybe a negate of his own or something, but it doesn't look like he really has anything in the way of protection, you know, just a bunch of big spells that he hasn't really been casting.
And he draws a Thragtusk for the turn. And again, this is what makes Aetherling so difficult, is normally when you draw Thragtusk, you're pretty happy, but Aetherling doesn't really care about Thragtusk, or anything for that matter, for the most part. So, you know, if he does slam down a Thragtusk here, I wouldn't be surprised to see Merriam just go, that's fine. Like, are you done? And because I just do not care about that at all.
Can't attack, can't block. What's not to love?
You know, this is, you know, again, Aetherling's kind of interesting because it's a card that you're not going to play 4 copies of, but, you know, it's a card that when it does show up, it defines how games are played, like moving forward once it's in play. So in that regard, it's almost like it's a format-defining card, or at least a format-defining creature, because as a deck, your goal is to not let that thing get into play. And if it ever does get into play, you have to play like this sub-game of like, all right, how do I beat this Aetherling that's got into play, or, you know, how do I at least try to mitigate the damage? And that's what people are kind of feeling firsthand, or trying to figure out, all right, this is what it feels like to play Aetherling. I don't like this.
As a control deck, basically the only way to beat a resolved Aetherling is to have flyers, and to be able to slow the Aetherling down long enough with things like Azorius Charm, or potentially like Tragic Slip if another guy's died, but just basically instant speed, spell removal spells that you use after the Aetherling has used its pump ability, so that you basically get to time walk them, but that doesn't work unless you're putting pressure on them. And right now, Jake not really applying that much pressure to Ross, giving him a lot of time. You know, he could have cast Aetherling last turn, it would have got dissipated, but at this point in the game, you know, you can't really afford to let your opponent have an extra turn. You know, every turn with Aetherling is another 8 points of damage, potentially, and, you know, things are just going to get out of control.
So you see Liliana the Veil, that's going to tick down. It's going to make Merriam sacrifice his Augur of Bolas.
Big deal.
He
did his job.
He tried to. As you see, Sacred Foundry is the card drawn here. Aetherling's going to go unblockable style. And see you later, Liliana the Veil, says Merriam.
Just not really want to leave it around for too long. It looks like Ross is just going to play defense here with his Aetherling, attacking and then giving it pseudo-vigilance. I don't really think I like the attack too much from Ross on the Liliana per se, because he could have just hit Jake for, you know, 7, maybe 8 points of damage. He has a ton of extra mana. He, you know, maybe he wants to hold up for Dissipate and Syncopate. Maybe he's afraid of, you know, a pair of spells from Jake that, you know, would be pretty devastating. But it looks like here, sorry, that's Architect of Thought. Probably going to get Dissipated, and then the follow-up play is going to get Syncopated.
It's really interesting because, he just doesn't mind that. As you're going to see Jace tick down. Here's a Jace Memory Depth, a Mutilate, and a Warped Physique that Ross is going to have to split up, and it is a little bit interesting just to see that spell resolve. But I think Merriam's thought process is now it's just like, that doesn't really matter that much. I'm just going to start going to the Dome with my Aetherling, be able to keep blocking your Thragtusk and phase it out. And your Thragtusk is irrelevant, and your Jace Architect of Thought is the least relevant of the potential Jaces you can play.
You know, Ross playing a very safe game here, and this is something you don't see a whole lot from people playing Control, is patience. And the best players have that patience to sit back, you know, deduce what are the more important spells that your opponent could be playing as opposed to the ones he is playing. Because as you've, you know, pointed out a couple times, it's all about just making sure that you're able to keep from losing the game as opposed to actively winning the game. Because the cards he has in play, the cards he has in hand, will win him the game if he plays them in the correct sequence. But if he makes one small mistake, like he counters the wrong spell, if he, you know, plays an instant speed spell like a card draw spell into a Notion Thief, you know, for example, he could just lose the game. Whereas right now he's just, you know, not losing the game.
And for everything that Aetherling does, you know, it also lets you block Thragtusk, use a mana, give it -1/+1. I think it's a 3/6, which beats Thragtusk in a fight.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. You don't even have to, you know, block Blink. You just actually get to eat it.
Yeah, for some reason I was under the impression you just have to block Blink, attack, blink it out, block Blink. But no, just activate mana, kill your Thragtusk.
Yeah.
So now this is going to go unblockable. He's just going to eat this Jace. And yeah, he's just refusing to use any resources. Now he might just cast his own Jace, which we haven't seen him do. Or he might just play this patient game of like, yeah, this again with the Aetherling. Maybe I don't do anything. Maybe I just play my land and say go. As you said, he's playing a very conservative, patient game, but I don't think he has any reason not to.
Right. You know, Jake's not really putting up much of a fight here. You know, he's playing, you know, these spells every turn, but none of them even come close to Aetherling. You know, he's got a Warp Physique. I guess Aetherling comes close to Aetherling.
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that he doesn't have a Cavern of Souls in the 75 means that it's never going to resolve against Ross's Dissipate. But it looks like Ross does decide to pull the trigger here with a Jace of his own. He's a little afraid of just, like, getting milled out with the Nefali Drownyard, since things like Warp Physique and various other removal spells could hinder his ability to deal the full 22 points of damage before the Drownyard actually kills him.
And I like taking the opportunity to have this be another avenue of victory. You know, get that Jace out there. Now you have two ways to victory: Aetherling damage or Jace milling. And now it puts a ton of pressure on Taft to actually, you know, do something finally. As he's going to cast a Snapcaster Mage here, we're going to see what he's going to blink. As Merriam's going to take a look before he lets this resolve.
Looks like he's probably going to target the away side of Far and Away, give him a little bit of Edict action for the Aetherling, forcing Ross to blink it again. And this is going to let Jake actually kill the Memory Adept unless Ross uses this Dissipate. But now, you know, this game looking like it might be becoming pretty close, because Jake's going to be able to land an Aetherling of his own. With only 2 mana up, Ross could only have an Essence Scatter, but he does not have one in his hand. Or in his deck, for that matter.
So we might see an Aetherling work here. Again, it's on Taft to actually be willing to pull the trigger on his Aetherling. As you see him kind of considering his decisions right now on what should I do on the end of turn. You know, is Warp Physiquing worth it? Am I just going to Drownyard you, which I am? He's going to turn over a Jace Memory Adept, a Cavern of Souls, and a Snapcaster Mage. Before he untaps, he goes to his upkeep and he's going to draw a card. Now he's got Ross's shields down. This is where you have to take advantage.
Yeah. You know, an Aetherling here from Jake, backed up with a couple removal spells to keep the Aetherling blinking in and out of existence, might actually be what ends up giving Jake the game. And you see how just like the small turn of the game from when Ross played his Jace, he wanted to make sure that his Jace was able to survive, burned his Dissipate on something like a Snapcaster Mage on just a removal spell that wouldn't even have killed anything, you know, and that's going to, like, you know, Ross is still going to have his Jace in play, but he's going to be facing down an opposing Aetherling while he's at 14. That's just 2 big swings away from killing you. And, you know, Aetherling can't block Aetherling. There's not some magical realm where unblockable means unblockable only except for other Aetherlings.
But we'll give them some time. I think they'll add that on.
I hope
to the
so.
Next version of Aetherling.
Yeah, that's like horsemanship.
Yeah,
you know, it's
they
just
get
like,
the battle in their own
why
territory.
can't they just get horsemanship?
So let's see. You know, the Beast comes across and attacks the Jace instead of Merriam. You know, with being at 14 life, you know, he could have just went towards Ross, and Ross could have blocked there if he wanted to, and he chose not to. So maybe he just doesn't think that, you know, that Jace, that attacking of Jace, maybe Merriam's just like, I don't really mind that very much this go around. I mind the next one, but I don't mind this one.
Right. I guess there's not a huge difference here between a Jace at 4 and a Jace at 1 when all you're doing is milling 10 for the rest of the game, but if Jake still has 5 cards in his hand after this Warp Physique,
how many swamps does he have? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh man, I think he just made a huge blunder.
I think so too. I think what he was trying to set up this turn was mutilate, targeting your mutilate with 5. You know, kill your Aetherling, and then so he's actually gonna be able to kill it with 2 Warp Physiques. But yeah, the mutilate was a misstep. But now you still are
facing down a Jace, and this makes Ross's play look much better. But I think Jake actually could have very easily won this game if he just took the turn to cast an Aetherling. You know, he's still got about 20 to 30 cards left in his deck. It's only been 1 activation from the Jace, I believe. And, you know, he had plenty of time to kill Ross with Aetherling, but now just killing that Aetherling, he's still got the Jace to contend with. And it's going to be an uphill battle since Ross does still have that Syncopate in hand.
Ross is going to start his turn by flashing back a Think Twice. And again, Todd, I think what kind of comes into this is you're going to see a Jace activation. It's going to knock Jake's deck down to approximately 13 cards. Is he has only one Aetherling, and he is valuing it like he has one Aetherling, because he does not have any more to draw to. I think if he had more to draw to, we would have seen him cast the first one, but he knows that I've got one Aetherling, I need it to stick, I can't afford to let Merriam dissipate it, rewind it, syncopate it, whatever. I need it to get into play, and that's why he's so hesitant in casting it.
Yeah. You know, I think unless Jake has a Miracle top deck here of, you know, a Jace and a counter spell of some sorts, he's not going to be able to deal with the memory I have from Ross's side, because Ross does have that syncopate. You know, Ross now has rewind on top of the syncopate, and
that's going to be a concession. You see Jake Taft's hand. He shows him a Farseek, shows him Mutilate, a couple of lands, saying,
Dude,
I really
still had all these.
Resolve.
I didn't need them.
Yeah. And so Ross Merriam is going to win the match 2 games.